From 1987 to 2004, Providence Catholic High School in New Lenox went to the Illinois Dual State Wrestling Championship. Their rise to national prominence included an unprecedented 6-year run of titles, beginning in 1997. The following 2 seasons, the Celtics were runners-up to St. Rita High School in duels that went down to the last match. Instrumental in laying the foundation was Mike Poles, an assistant with Tim Rudiger from 1983 to 1988, and head coach from 1989 to 1993. Under Poles' direction, the Celtics won titles in 1988 and in 1989, which included champions Ken Gertis at 125 pounds, Sean Bourmet at 145 pounds, and Mike McClarence at 189 pounds, finishing the season ranked second nationally behind Ohio school powerhouse St. Edwards.
When I look back on my whole career, now I realize how fortunate I am, and you look back then, I was, probably a lot of coaches, I couldn't always, I didn't always know why. It seemed like they were, jealous or, not thinking I had paid my dues or whatever, but, I guess I didn't realize what I had at the time.
One of those mentored and molded by Poles was Sean Bourmet.
Mike Poles was at Providence when I first got there as a freshman. I was 14 years old, and he had a tremendous impact on my high school career. He really taught me the value of technique, and also brought out a competitive edge and a certain amount of toughness he ingrained in us and our team. And that played a huge role throughout my whole career.
I came from a pretty good program at Eastern Illinois with Ron Clinton, and we were successful there. So, I think that's how I always liked to coach. Whether it be, football or wrestling. I always thought that we could, would, could, should win, and that's what you want to try and get through to your athletes.
Wrestling at Providence was a great experience for me. We had a tremendous team, some great individuals, great families. We had a really, really good coaching staff up and down, and in the center of that was Mike Poles.
The Celtics' mystique grew with their success.
When I first came in, I was just looking to continue the traditions that Tim Rudiger and Mike Poles started and continued. So when I came in, I was basically just trying to put some pieces together. All I want to do is continue that tradition, and hopefully my youth would help me carry it to that next level.
A major part of their first 4 championships, and a member of their nationally ranked team in 2000, was Brian Glynn.
It was a real exciting time. I wouldn't say it was pressure. I don't think we ever felt much pressure. It was more, after we won that first one, I don't think we really expected, and some of those guys you mentioned, we were young, kind of naive. Our first state title since we've been there, and ever since then it was more like it was expected. That's truly how it was felt. We had guys that came in from Little Celtics and Pioneers, and we just kind of knew that we were going to be good. We never really felt any pressure to win a state title. It was more that we were going to win a state title at the time.
Yeah, that first title was one of the most exciting. We wrestled a Marist team earlier in the season. They beat us, but we felt with the right matchups we might be able to compete with them at the finals in '97. It was awesome to going back to Huff Hall where I wrestled in college, and it was a situation where everything just kind of kept falling into place.
You take any practice room and you put good wrestlers in there, it's only going to excel to where you can be. It's going to bring the intensity level up. Just everyone in general, even the below average guys are going to become above average, because you have to kind of survive in that wrestling room, and that's how it was. Day in and day out, you could be a state placer or a state champ, and there you would have an off day and you get beat up pretty bad in the wrestling room.
But really what it really came down to is they knew the family atmosphere that we were looking for. Wrestling is a unique sport in a situation where it's just you and someone else on the mat, but at practice every day to prepare yourself, it's just all the blood, the sweat, and the tears that you put through up here that really they knew what they wanted to do as a team, and that was probably the funnest to see them grow up as a family.
A mid-season trip to Cleveland for a duel against St. Edwards gave the Celtics an understanding of what it's like to go against the nation's best.
I think that year there was a little bit of swagger on that whole team. We had just come off winning 2 in a row, and we had a lot of people returning, and just kind of knew that we were gonna win that year. And it was actually a lot harder than we thought that year. Now, I thought we had the best team ever until we went to St. Ed's and just got destroyed. You know, that was kind of our first taste of national level competition. But I think that really put us in our place, without a doubt, because we walked into there and thought that, you know, we were the best, and we just got it handed to us.
Coming to Sandburg in 1993, Poles instilled a mindset on the mat.
You know, I expected to win when I came to Sandburg, but you know, again, it was a little more difficult than I thought.
Sandburg faced stiff competition annually in the regional, bouncing between Mount Carmel, who won 3 state titles in a row between 1992 and 1994, and Providence, who won 5 championships between 1997 and 2002. A series of dual sectional exits left Poles wondering if the Eagles could ever break through.
And there was actually a time when I was starting to think, boy, I don't know if we'll ever be able to challenge, you know, for a state title, just because I knew we'd always have to battle, you know, Providence, probably, or Mount Carmel. I mean, if you look back, you know, before we got, you know, before we ever got a state medal, you know, it was always one of those 2 teams, and it just happened to be when they were really rolling, you know, and you know, they finally would move us in a sectional, you know, we'd be with Providence, and they'd move us, and they'd move us right with Mount Carmel, and it seemed like they moved us right when, you know, when both programs had their best teams, you know, and then they moved us back again, you know, so we had to battle, you know, like I said, one or the other for a long time.
Fresh off an NCAA championship in 1988 with the Illinois Fighting Illini, Eric Siebert helped fortify a formidable staff.
Anytime you can get a national champion on your coaching staff, you know, and especially the caliber of Eric, you know, and not only as a coach, but, you know, I mean, he's a great teacher to have in the school too, you know. You know, he just has a real positive impact on everybody that he comes, you know, in touch with, and you know, that was very important, you know.
In 2004, the Eagles suffered a 30-19 loss to Providence, an outcome that surprised no one.
You know, they had a few more guns than us that night, and you know, I think as long as we competed hard, anytime that you know you're happy as a coach.
The sense of 2 trains on a collision course was palpable by both athletes and fans as the season progressed. Poles and Siebert began to look at potential engagements for a tilt 7 months away.
Well, you know, we knew we had a good team, you know, right from the beginning. But then, you know, I believe we competed against them at the Dvorak, you know. So you're going to get a couple matchups then, and you know, you're looking at their, you know, at their guys and how they doing, and you know, how are they doing, and how are we doing, and you know, seeing who's close, you know, and maybe you wrestle a few times in that tournament. You know, we didn't wrestle a duel, but you know, I think you're starting to put those matchups together, you know, for sure halfway through, and you know, seeing sort of like you said, a collision course, you know, a couple trains. I mean, we know we're probably going to be the 2 teams, and we probably knew from the year before, but you know, it looks more concrete, you know, as you get into the middle of that season.
Yeah, most duels that you go into in a situation like that, I know Coach Poles and Coach Siebert over there had the same idea. You know, it's really going to come down to 1 or 2 weight classes, and you know, and that's how it is. You know, I've been very fortunate. I've been able to, I feel, be able to coach at the level that most people will never be able to.
The magnitude of the event began to build as the 2,000-seat Providence Gym began to swell to a crowd of over 3,000. Nothing could prepare the coaches for the rock concert-like atmosphere of the gym. The noise was near deafening as the teams took to the mat.
That was actually one of the first times that I came back to watch a dual meet, because I knew it was going to be good. So, you know, I rode up with a couple buddies, and I know Coach Johnson was there, and I do remember that was without a doubt the best duel that I've ever been to. I remember I didn't have a seat. I was in the corner by the locker room, standing on a chair, because that was the only way to see anything.
I represented Providence, but I wrestled for Mike Poles when I was there. And on top of that, I had been already probably 4 or 5 years into running the Overtime School of Wrestling, so we had kids we were training on the Sandburg team and kids we were training on the Providence team. So there were a lot of dynamics that night that were very uncomfortable for me. I tried to sit in the stands and be as stoic as I could, not really show any reaction or emotion, anything that was going on, regardless of which team it was. And it was an outstanding dual meet. It was down to the wire, and you know, it was it was great night of wrestling for any wrestling fan.
Victories from Tyler Mancuso at 189 pounds, Tim Jay at 215 pounds, and Kyle Cornwall at heavyweight gave the Celtics a 9-0 lead. The tide began to shift as Eagles freshman 103-pounder Mike McAuliffe beat Jake Nelson, while Sandberg freshman Kevin White defeated Danny Steed, who filled in for Celtic Ron Ucardi, who was home with a 102-degree fever. Providence came back when Kyle Hutter nipped freshman Conrad Poles 6-5, and Scott DeCant earning a 1-0 decision over Mike Schaefer at 130 pounds. Two of Sandberg's most consistent performers, Brandon Preeson and Matt Cusick, both earned critical majors. In this type of duel, the unexpected often comes into play.
Danny Rudiger wrestled Mike Anello, and Mike Anello, I believe, was a state placer that year. And Danny Rudiger fell just short of doing that.
Mike Anello, who finished third in state, ended up losing 9-3 to Rudiger. With less than 8 seconds left in overtime, Eric Preto delivered a blast double leg to Marty Engwall, securing another Sandberg win. Before the meet began, Anello told Seabrook that junior varsity member John Doyle would be an ideal fit against two-time state champion Sean Reynolds.
And so I was looking at our lineup, and Johnny Doyle would be wrestling varsity for any other team in the state, but he was just in a tough lineup. And I just went up to Coach Bowles and I go, look, we can get this lineup set up to where we can bump a few of our stronger guys up and then plug Johnny in, and then he can just fight for his life, because Reynolds is a tough wrestler. But you know, if he emerges with anything less than a pin, then we're winning.
Unable to turn John Doyle to his back, Reynolds settled for a 14-5 major decision, putting Providence up 22-17 going into the 160-pound match.
I remember thinking to myself, Providence they're gonna lose this dual meet. When it started to get right down to the wire, I thought, man, the momentum shifted. They might lose this dual meet.
Victories from Ben Friedel and Brett Ambrosino put the Eagles ahead 23-22. The two-decade hold the Catholic schools held over wrestling in the state of Illinois was finally over.
People, yeah, you're right. They talk about, you know, this team and that team and who it is. You know, you really can't. You can only guess, because until it happens in that situation, you know, you get there on that night, you never know what's going to happen. We didn't know what was going to happen.